A very good evening to you and welcome to the desk here on Global Television. And this is where we get to talk about all pressing issues that affect you and help you make informed decision with the discussion here, even on this table. We will talk today on out-of-school children, especially within Africa. And let's even put this issue in perspective. It is estimated that about 244 million children and youth between the ages of 6 and 18 worldwide were out of school as at even the year 2024. At least if you narrow this down to Africa and by extension Nigeria, you realize that it speaks volume on the Nigerian, because about 18.3 million children, according to the UNICEF record, are still out of school in Nigeria. Now, we don't want to narrow this down to states because it will become something that is debatable because we don't yet have a full statistics. But on a regular basis, school children are going out of school, and this is not just a story, a fairy tale, but it has become like a normal thing, especially within the every part of the country. Now, we'll be looking at this and more even on this table this evening, and joining me to talk about out-of-school children in Africa and by extension Nigeria is Prince Owo Great. And Prince Owo Great is a senior legislative aide to the Senate President, and we will be crossing the I's and dotting the T's even on this conversation this evening. But first, let me welcome him to the studio. You're welcome to the desk, Prince Owo.
Thank you very much, Godwin, and thank you for having me.
All right, Prince, let's delve into the conversation right away. You've listened to the analysis about 18.3 million children by UNICEF 2024 records and reports are out of school just in Nigeria. We don't want to even narrow this, take it widely to Africa. But look at all of this. What do you make of this development?
Well, the records are clear, and the facts are there. I think that report comes from UNESCO, and I clearly also have stumbled upon the numbers. I think over 94 million are affected, grossly affected in sub-Saharan Africa, which over 18.3 million, which, I mean, it's the highest record in the world, out-of-school children in Nigeria, which, I mean, it's something that it should bother every nation. It should bother every continent. And this just tells us there's a lot of loopholes in the educational system that we should, beam a focus on. Either as a country, either as a continent, it's imperative. We cannot have that number of out-of-school children and expect to move into the future with the Western world, where the world is going to. So it's really worrisome that we are looking at that amount of numbers of people. I mean, how many are we? If you're looking at the statistics that UNESCO has drawn out, this is something that, I mean, it's a blow on the feet. Malcolm X said that education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. In the famous words of my principal, Gospel about Pabio, he said, education is a beacon that shall shine through the darkness of ignorance, guiding young minds towards the shores of wisdom and greatness. And if this is bordered around education, we shouldn't be seeing this number of out-of-school children. I believe that a lot of things need to be done. Things are being done, but we need to ramp up the numbers, ramp up the initiatives, the reforms. We need to do a whole lot better for us to see a decreasing number in the rate of out-of-school children in Africa, particularly in Nigeria, which is our home country.
Well, I was trying to run away from starting the conversation from Nigeria, but you've taken us to Nigeria.
Right.
So, but then let's look at Africa first.
Okay.
And the numbers keep rising. Year in, year out, the numbers across Africa keep rising. Mm-hmm. But let's take it from an historical perspective. Where did we get this wrong? Where did we get it wrong?
Honestly, Godwin, if you ask me, this is something that has been, I mean, from inception, if you ask me. Ordinarily, ever since I was having a team meeting with a couple of my friends who are partners, NGOs, and we're just looking at how the educational system in Africa, pre-COVID-19. You see after COVID, there's been a lot of even more downsides as to education, more out of school children, and this just tells us that it's not even just today, it has been from inception. And so many things has got us here: political instability, from conflict to as much as even the African ideology. If you're looking at the disparity as to gender, girls are very marginalized, the disabled also, and those in marginalized communities can't even keep up. So if you look at the structure of Africa and how the developments are coming into places, you see that for West Africa and Central Africa, we have a lot of out-of-school children. The numbers are ramped up in these areas, which is not far-fetched. Poverty, conflict. We are also even going to contribute to child labor, where a lot of children are responsible for bringing in income into the family, which has disturbed the whole cycle when it comes to education. For countries like East Africa, yes, some rural areas, even if they're doing a little bit good, they are still marginalized areas also that are affected. North Africa are really trying their numbers. They're really trying to see how they could, drastically, bring down the out-of-school children. But even with that, they still have their own challenges, because a lot of the marginalized rural areas also are not able to, get into school. So it has always been more or less like an African thing, even if we are trying to see how we can, take away this syndrome of out-of-school children. But then, Godwin, these things have just been there. We really have, as Africans, tilted towards our roots. Farming, which is not an excuse. If you ask me, there should be inclusive educational systems that will bring in and bridge the gap between rural areas, unprivileged youths or children, that will be incorporated in ways that will, give them an advantage and give them that inclusivity towards education, which will do a lot of the, the down tools as to the number of out-of-school children. So it has always been there, but for me, I feel like a lot is being done, and a lot should still be done, because the numbers needs to go down, Godwin, honestly.
So we can't attribute this to the fact that Africans are not too comfortable with the Western education, and they want to just stick to the Africanism as a means of learning and a means of studies. And that's why the numbers keep, because most of the excuses that we've seen so far, the surveys have been carried out, we've seen most people rather want to learn the African ways than wanting to even be educated on the Western part. So we can attribute this to why the numbers keep increasing.
We're not going to shy away from it, Godwin. I mean, look at us. We are seated here looking very African. So this is just to tell you that they have to be incorporatives, and inclusivity as to going into the roots and seeing how we can merge this in respect to education. It shouldn't just be about the Western. I mean, recently, the administration of the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration has brought about, I think it's called the Out of School Initiative, where education has been prioritized as to skill development, inclusivity as to language, inclusivity into the learning process. For those who feel like, okay, I'm going to get it better with my mother tongue. I was on one of the TV stations recently where one of the guests was presenting mathematics in vernacular, in Pidgin English. I will tell you, we have the culture of, math is not my thing, But I tell you, that guy was dissecting mathematical formula in Pidgin English, and I could tell that, okay, if I had started in this way, probably I would have gotten most of this mathematics formula.
You would have been a super engineer by now.
I tell you, my brother, I would have been a super engineer. You can see that. But then you can see that these are mediums, these are initiatives that are worthwhile looking at our African background. We shouldn't just peg the whole thing on, yes, this is how the professors in the Western education are going about, the learning processes. We must see to the need of inclusivity. We are Africans, and if there's a way we can bridge bridge the gap and bring the African learning, or infuse the African culture into the educational sector, which will give us those drastic numbers down, then it's a welcome idea, which we've seen that African countries also are beginning to tilt towards that direction. And in no time, if we are looking at the projection of UNESCO towards 2030 as to the drastic numbers of out-of-school children, we should be able to achieve this feat.
Well, Prince, great. We've seen the budget of a lot of African countries so far. We've seen that of Burkina Faso, down to Mali, down to South Africa. We've seen their budget, and not even the budget. Let's even start with the last Addis Ababa, the conference that was held at Addis Ababa of head of state. Largely what is being talked about is largely on security, largely on health, and we give little attention to education. With us relegating education to the back door of inconsequential, even narrowing it down to Nigeria, how much was earmarked in the 2025 budget for education? Infinitesimally low. With all of this attention not given to education, are we sure that we can even win the war against illiteracy, talk less of reducing the numbers of out-of-school children?
Godwin, you know I'm a very, very optimistic person. I like to look at the greener side. And in all honesty, we saw of the President Bola Ahmed administration, giving or allocating an unprecedented 3.5 trillion in the 2025 budget, which is going to be keyed into resources, training of teachers, rejigging the educational system. And this number is quite unprecedented. I feel like this is a number that, unlike before, we have never gotten such. A 3.5 trillion in education is quite a number that is a pace setter by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to key into the educational system and see how illiteracy can be tackled, as well as the out-of-school syndrome numbers to drastically go down. And you see the partnership between the legislatives, in the leadership of Senator Godswill Akpabio and the 10th Senate, have evidentially put their focus and beamed their lights on making sure that the out-of-school syndrome is being tackled. Just recently, in 2024, October, an out-of-school children's summit was being held, which was an initiative by the Senate, the 10th Senate, where the leader of the Senate saw the need for them to bring around stakeholders in the educational system, from the presidency to the state local government officials, to the state governors, and including civil society organizations, to bring about strategies in which they can tackle the out-of-school children. Godwin, you agree with me that when leaders prioritize education, in which a very good example is that of Godswill Akpabio, with initiatives even from when his tenure in 2007 to 2015 as governor alone, you would see where he brought about reforms, and initiatives where free basic primary education was compulsory, free compulsory basic education for every child in the state. It's not a thing about the north, south, east, or west. No, it is a collective thing. And when we have such leaders come up front and say, yes, let us tackle the syndrome in this manner, it's a key indicator that indeed, if we continue in this momentum, the numbers will drastically come down. That is why I really appreciate the Senate President, where he calls to action the need for leaders, religious leaders, community leaders, to emphasize on the need for free and basic compulsory education, because the education, these are the bedrock of the economy. If we need social amenities, if we want to see youth empowerment, we need to see that the education sector has a beefer, has good initiatives, good reform, good funding also when we look at infrastructures. If you're looking at, even diversifying into digital platforms that can aid those numbers drastically come down, because we need to look at all ends, analog and the digital, where you have properly trained teachers also to, carve into this number for it to come down drastically. In the use of technology, only recently, like I was telling you, with one of the NGOs who we are trying to partner and collaborate, we saw initiatives in collaboration with Microsoft, as well as, if I'm correct, Facebook, with an initiative where they have, devised means and strategies of e-learning platforms that could reach out to the, other communities. So these things would definitely wrap down the numbers, in all honesty, when it comes to the out-of-school children syndrome.
Well, nicely said. but again, there is another angle to this story.
Okay.
Most parents are lamenting that their children are dropping out of school because of the fact that the school systems, the primary, secondary schools, are increasing their fees. Now, you go for holidays and you resume, and the fees are astronomically taken up, and there is nothing you can do about this. And as such, we've had more numbers of out-of-school children prevailing, even here in Nigeria. Can we say that the school preparators and school owners are being wicked to parents by increasing the prices of their school fees and hereby throwing us more into the calamity, into the doom, into the dungeon of out-of-school children? Can we look at it from that perspective also right now?
There's the business part of schooling when it comes to those who own the organizations and all that. But if you ask me, I don't think any parents or anyone who is being a parent would intentionally ramp up the numbers of school fees just to make sure that the kids don't have an access to schools, or to a proper education, I really don't see it from that angle. Fine, we have, global numbers and differences in which these indices affect the running of schools, power supply, and all the rest, salary payment for teachers, and all those things are just a collective of, while we could say maybe schools are being, I don't want to use the word inhumane, but to me, ordinarily, I don't think proprietors would want to ramp up the fees.
It has become a recurring phenomenon, a common decimal factor, that they do this over and over again.
Yes.
You know the figures that you're going home with when you're taking your child for vacation.
Yes.
When you're coming back, it's different. We saw similar thing happen around August.
Okay.
We're seeing a similar thing happening right here in January. And parents are lamenting. And because of that, we had more numbers of out-of-school children. Are you saying on this table, even on this desk, that is not shared wickedness?
I don't want to say shared wickedness, but if it's shared wickedness, the principals or the owners of schools need to down tool and really look at how they can give their quota back to the society, back to the community, back to the African community, back to Nigeria. Just recently, in the administration of the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration, he kick-rolled the loan scheme for students. He kicked out the loan scheme for students where underprivileged students were able to get loans to give them access to quality education. And this is quite unprecedented because it's something we have never seen before. And a lot of students have benefited from this in the higher educational sector. So if we have policies and initiative of the government whereby their aim is to make sure they get inclusivity of the less privileged, the underprivileged, and those who cannot have access to higher education or simple basic education, it is then a very wonderful initiative that we must applaud the administration of the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration, as well as African countries also who are also taking such initiatives. School feeding programs, which also borders around the nutrition, which will inevitably help them also focus in school. These are initiatives that the governments are coming out, and every other government also have to come out with such initiatives that would ease, the financial aspect to students, youths who want to get access to education. We also must place factors on private-public partnership. Such initiatives also would help, because we cannot run away from the economical downturns and the economical infrastructures that are also impeding school setups to actually run smoothly and provide conducive learning environment for children. I believe they are doing their utmost best. Those who are educators, who are school owners, community leaders, engagers should do their utmost best to make sure that we are not just being inhumane in raising the cost of the educational sectors for our children. It is going to come back at us if that is their focus, if you ask me in all honesty. It has not been easy for school either, but we must meet in the middle, whereby we know we have conducive accessibility, access education for children, to ramp down on the number of out-of-school children, as well as also consider proper access to learning environment for educators, school owners, as well as, whatever that sector, holds for children when it comes to education.
All right. So, Freeze Great.
Yes.
While you were talking, most parents will say, most school owners will say that it is not their fault that the schools are increasing their prices or their fees. It is the fault of the government. The government are not providing enough tools for them. But then, looking at it again, we have a situation in our hand that it is more of a competitive syndrome where the private schools are becoming a bit advantageous compared to some of the public schools. I'll give you an instance.
Okay.
We have public schools and we have private schools. Most of the public schools that we have, the facilities that they have even for their science students, is nothing compared to what we have even on the private institutions. I don't want to mention name of private school, but take it even down to the university level. We see a lot of facilities that are being put in place. Now, this again makes a lot of people feel inferior. Just teenagers feel inferior. If I'm not going to a private school, it means I'm not schooling because I'm not getting the right tools and I'm not getting the right. No, you are laughing because it's a serious conversation.
It is a serious conversation, but I like there's a statement you made in there that records with me.
Look at all of these factors again. Could this also be an inferiority complex? Also serve as a modality why students will want to stop going to school and the numbers keep increasing?
Well, inferiority complex, that's one of the things education is keyed on and hitting on. Because it's one thing for you to be educated, it's another thing for you to be able to use the education in your advantage. When you talk about private and public school, I will tell you that I'm a product of a public school. Which I also benefited from initiatives of government where I had, under the Governor Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration, where he brought out the free WAEC, an initiative in Lagos, where while I was in Lagos Model College Igbobo, I benefited from that. And I've gone to a federal school, I've been to a private school, but I'm a product of both the government and the private school, and I can tell you that my experience while I was in the government school was something to write home about because we saw adequate, learning accessibility. We saw teachers who we trained, we were, prioritized, even if the times are different. So the disparity between public and private school should not bring about inferiority complex, and yes, there is a room. However, there is a room for government to do better, to make sure that the government schools are also set up to standard where you don't feel like because you're not going to a private school that you're not getting the best of education. And that's why it's very important, and I appreciate my principal, Godswill Okpabio, the Senate President, who have outlined to making sure that the 10th Senate, he and his colleagues in the 10th Senate, strengthen laws that will foster, free and compulsory education as well as accessibility to proper educational access. If we have these laws being put in place and we make sure that we monitor and follow up all this process, you would see that a lot of students would even tilt towards the government initiative schools, because then the best and the brightest of mind are there. Nevertheless, if you can afford to want to further your education, or you feel that your child should be in a private school, not a bad choice. But the question of inferiority complex coming in between, because I'm in a government school and a private school, for from my picture, that's why I giggled, because in my experience, I've had more biffers from a government school, in which I also have a private school background, but from the government school, I know of so much program, so much, discipline and, initiatives that have been favorable for me, that has gotten me to the height of, success of where I am today, So I do not see governments or students, who are in government school, needing to embrace the inferiority complex of, because my neighbor is going to a private school means he's doing better than me. We have seen the best of leaders in this country, and the best of minds have come out from public schools, to drive initiatives and set precedents that, a common man wouldn't even believe. So when you talk about the inferiority complex as a public school and private school, for me, it's not even in the conversation. Parents also need to, build the psychic and the mentality of their kids to know that you are in school, and you also have a duty to make sure that you take advantage of what you have to the benefit of yourself in growing yourself. You might not have certain, like you made mention of science students and not having adequate science laboratory. Like I said, the 2025 budget, looking at an unprecedented allocation to the educational sector, should see resources, infrastructure development that would, ramp up the numbers that would drastically bring down the out-of-school children in our nation, as well as other African countries that are also tilting towards this direction. Public school, private school should just be the thing of, what do I have an access to? There are people who feel that, okay, I want my child to go through a government school structure because, they have this, they have that, compared to a private school where some believe, some, have their own beliefs also. Whichever it is, private or public, the most important thing is we are giving a focus to children to make sure that they benefit from accessible education that can take our nation and our continent into the future.
Well, so let me come personal on you at this point. Nice speech and you've spoken greatly, but let me put you on the spot right now.
Wonderful.
Let's say, for example, you're a beneficiary of President Bola Tinubu's educational policies in Lagos. Of course, I was a beneficiary, so I think we share the same background.
Wonderful.
In Lagos. but then again, we're talking about the generality of a people. In Africa, we're talking about children as far as interior part of Congo, Togo, Ghana, Benin Republic, and what have you, not just in Western Africa, but taking it to Kenya and other in Eastern African countries, these conversations. Now let's narrow it back again to Nigeria. You are in the north, and you're privileged to go to the north. Are you privileged to stay in the north? And you're staying in a place, interior part of Gombe. Let's say you're staying in Biliri or Katingo in Gombe. Or we're taking you back to the interior part of Sokoto, or you're going to the interior part of Taraba. And you see the school structures. I don't know if we can even display some of the school structures on the screen so that you have a clue of what we're trying to explain. The budget that have been passed, is there a time frame for implementation to boost the educational system as to discourage this inferiority complex that I've spotted out? That's one. Then two, to put you on the spot. If your child is growing up, Prince, or can you put your child in a school, in a public school, in the most remotest part of Nigeria?
Godwin, straight answer, yes, I'll be able to put my child in the most remote parts of Nigeria when you talk about public school. I think that's one experience my father, which I will thank him till tomorrow, had given to me. Right Honorable Paul Owo. He sent me down to Taraba State in my secondary school days.
Urban Taraba, not the rural Taraba.
When you say, do you know if it is the urban? Do you know if it is the urban? I was in Federal Science and Technical College, Jalingo.
Jalingo is that what?
Yes, so
the urban Taraba.
Yes, but I want to bring out something.
All right, please go.
Because we took initiatives as exposed students at the time coming to the north for the very first time to see certain interior villages that were cut out of education. We took it upon ourselves to reach out to there. We were giving our books. We were, trying to see how we could provide chalks for them. We were students ourselves, but when we had holidays, we were trying to do this. We went as far as even to some places in Yola, and we could see that there was a lot of work that had to be done. You also look at insecurity, which has relatively affected these areas also. It's not far-fetched from history when we talk about the Boko Haram, Chibok girls issue, where you see that girls, girl education was hampered on and targeted on, where about a number of girls were abducted. That alone will send shivers down your spine for you to send your child back to school. So the administration are doing a lot on security for us to be able to make sure that there's access to education. And if you're talking about the implementation timeline, that is why we have the National Assembly in place, who will definitely, bring about the expertise when it comes to oversight function, to mandate the educational sector to making sure that they stick to the timeline. My principal is somebody who is he wears education in his heart. So he's somebody who from time to time has called out for the initiatives, has called actions to people, and I can guarantee you that he is going to be bent on making sure that the 2025 budget, when you were talking about the educational sector, is keyed into making sure that they follow up to implementing, evaluating, monitoring, and consistent follow-up to making sure that the budgets as to the allocation given to the educational sector is properly, being done justice as to timeline like you have mentioned. So if that is the case, we must give the vote of confidence also to the administration, as well as to African countries that are doing their bit. In Kenya, we can see the numbers there. I have a good educational background in Ghana, where I have worked with NGOs, where we also make sure we pay attention to education when it comes to the rural environment, the rural areas, the underdeserved and privileged communities, girls' education, the disabled, which is also not far-fetched here in Nigeria also. You have countries even in Congo where they are also, taking these initiatives to the next level to making sure that there's access, in the educational sector to ramp down the out of school children numbers. Yes, conflict in a lot of these areas also disrupts these processes, from religious conflict to political instability, and so on and so forth. We can go on and on and on about all these things, but at the end of the day, I can guarantee you, God doing that, the numbers indeed was going to definitely ramp down.
So at this point, you're saying that the African presidents and heads of state should not declare an urgent state of emergency on the educational system, knowing fully well that numbers keep increasing. Would you be optimistic?
While we are staying optimistic, there is a need for us to declare such emergency. If that will put in the fire in political leaders, community leaders, global leaders, if this call for a state of emergency in the educational sector will also see private-public partnership as well as international NGOs come in to give their quota, then let us declare it, because at the end of the day, the children are the backbone of development in every country. The youth are the backbone of development, and we want to see children being educated, because that gives us a leverage into literacy that will see the right steps and norms being followed that would hamper and switch the numbers of the out-of-school children in Africa as a whole. So if you ask me, yes, let it be declared.
All right. So to a very large extent, we've seen development. Like you said, you're privileged to school in Jalingo Public School. We've seen most times when it has to do with budget and concentration of that implementation of the budget, it tends to happen in urban communities to a very large extent. We don't see practical demonstration of that budget implementation, especially on state levels and local government levels, on to rural communities. So most rural communities right now, which will have a large chunk of out-of-school children who have been affected by the school, by dropping out of schools, are right now watching us even on this show. And their hopes are being dashed every day because, like you said, that of course there's no comparison between them and a private school to a very large extent. The private school is the private school and the public school is the public school. But they are their contemporaries. And they see them to a very large extent. They go out together, they go to the same market, but the English differs. People in public school, majority of children for public school don't speak phonics and phonics. You know what we're trying to explain here. And you get to remote part of the country. So that's what I'm asking again. Could this not be a very large factor that has militated and is forcing more children to stay out of school, that the proposed budget for the educational sector does not get to the rural communities? Wouldn't this be a very large factor why we still have more cases of out-of-school children?
If it is a factor, which we're not going to shy away that it is a factor. However, like I made mention to you earlier, where we have out-of-school summits like that which was held in the Senate, by the 10th Senate and the leadership of Senator Godswill Akpabio, where they brought stakeholders, like I said, from the presidency to the state governors, to the local government officials, down to the civil society organizations, to drive initiatives that would hamper on the syndrome of the out-of-school children.
Who follows up after the summit?
Who follows up after the summit? Everyone has a part to play.
Okay.
Everyone has a part to play, from the legislators in the National Assembly to the presidency to the state governors. Because when we are looking at it, yes, we have schools which are under the federal structures, we have that which is under the state structures, and we have other structures when it comes to education. But at the end of the day, everyone must collectively come together to make sure that the aim, in drastically bringing out the out of school numbers, is being achieved. The legislative are doing their bit to make sure that they follow up on the necessity when it comes to the allocation as to the budget when it comes to the educational sector. That is why also you see such initiatives and reforms also are being hampered to making sure that state governors also take this upon themselves. We know when it comes to state governance how some don't place priority as to the rural areas like you have made mention to. And in this question, what can be done is the call to action to making sure that the society make sure that the leaders that they put in place are reminded on the need for them to reach out to those areas. When you're talking about primary basic education in rural areas, primary health care, this is the heart of the nation.
Let's not go to primary health.
Let's stick to education.
Let's just stick to education. We open another kind of worms. Let's just stick to education.
Yes.
The healthcare system is something to, let's just leave it at that.
Well, we are getting there, honestly. We are getting there. And we just want to see progress, in all honesty. And it is conversations like this that we beam our focus on, that the society, the African community, the continent Africa in itself should wear on their sleeves and make sure that the leaders are focused on the educational sector from the rural areas coming into the urban areas. We go to those rural areas for votes when it's time for election. What happens to your voices when that time comes? What happens to the voices to seek for representatives to be able to say, what have you done when it comes to educational system? Our schools are depleted. We do not have roofs. We do not have trained teachers who can make sure that our students are keeping to the educational framework that would allow them go into society and flourish. These are questions that we must ask as people. While the leaders are doing their bit, we put them there for a reason. We allow, for example, private companies who have CSR who come in and try to do their bit when it comes to education. We need to stand our ground and say, what has happened to XYZ that was allocated in this area that was supposed to come to, say, in a local government when it comes to my local government where I come from? What about the the primary educational center in your senatorial district, for my principal, he's doing his utmost best when it comes to reconstruction, when it comes to construction of proper school structures, as well as access to education coming from materials to training of teachers. But these things must be emphasized on and must be a continuous thing. We shouldn't just allow it break down and then, we are crying at the end of tenures to say, oh, what has been done? Like you said, there is a budget. When the implementation comes to that process, we also must have a follow-up. People must be able to lend their voices and say what is happening in these areas. They shouldn't be left out, as long as vote comes in from there, as long as food processes come from there, as long as we have Africans situated in Congo, in Rwanda, we have them in Nigeria, we have them in Nigeria, we have them in Burkina Faso, Ghana. We must prioritize, the conversation of the day, and that is making sure that education goes to every nook, crannies, and corner.
Well, Prince Great Owo, to a very large extent,
Yes.
it seems Africa is sitting on a time bomb. Between the year 2021 till date, the number of out-of-school children keeps increasing on a daily basis. Unreported out-of-school children. The statistics have captured, yes, we say 83 million children are out of school.
Over 94 million by
These
UNESCO.
were the reported cases. We still have unreported out-of-school children cases, which has led to the increase in child labor. It has led to increase in children foot soldiers across Africa. And the numbers keep going up. Banditry is right now being dominated by kids and teenagers who can be brainwashed into anything. And this is worrisome. If these numbers continue to grow, that's why I'm even talking to you. That's why we brought you here, so we can get enlightenment on where to go from here as a people. At least we can come out of this time bomb. So let's look at this increasing number. Do you think at this point that African leaders are ready to comb the insurgency of out-of-school children? Because it's an insurgency, whether we like it or not.
It is an
Are we
insurgency.
ready as a people to address this concern even in Africa?
We are ready. We are ready to make sure that, we work on this ticking time bomb as Africans. We have seen, even of recently, delegations as to the African Union, ECOWAS, led by Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as other chairmen also have come collectively to, tinker on solutions, on reforms, on initiatives, strategies that can see us move away from this out of school children syndrome that is taking over Africa. Like you've made mention, food soldiers, child labor is on a high rise due to illiteracy, due to inaccessible educational framework for children. That is why, for me, it's very important for not just the government, but community engagement must be put in place, where we have community leaders emphasize on the value of education to communities, as vast as everywhere in Africa. These are the very first people in society who the children have this interaction with. NGOs should come into that partnership also with community leaders for them to foster community engagement that will see the need for community leaders, for society leaders to hamper on the value of education to our kids, so that there is already this basic mental framework in their heads that would not allow them fall into the victimization of child labor or foot soldiers. And we can only do this when the community are very deliberate about such initiatives and actions, because it relatively has to start from home. So we must see it as a point of duty as Africans, as a point of duty to make sure we pass that basic education, even in the home, taking it away even to the societies, where you will have, for example, councils of chiefs, religious leaders, driving that key mantra of education to out-of-school children to make sure that they also pass through this section to become literate, because it is the way to go. If we continue in this fashion, we never can tell what is going to happen. Like you made mention, it is a ticking bomb, and it's a ticking bomb that I believe African leaders in the African continent, even in Nigeria, our nation, are keyed to making sure that this ticking bomb is put to rest, and this syndrome is something of the past in a few years to come.
All right, so before I let you go, I know we've been able to talk around having an overview of the out-of-school children, which is very important. We have that conversation even here on this table. Just before I let you go, even right now, I know your principal is very articulate when it comes to education, and also you've rightly also mentioned that even on this desk. Are there plans, programs, and policy in regards to education that we should be looking forward to? First-hand information, even from your principal, on this table.
Yes, of course. You will definitely have to consider initiatives and reforms from not just my principal, but the 10 Senate, as well as the administration of the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration. There will be a lot of rolled out educative initiatives. Already, some have already, been rolled out. Like I told you, the loan scheme, the back to school initiative, summits are being held to make sure that strategies are being brought out, and a whole lot are going to be wrapping in as
I'm very particular about your principal, so that we can hold you accountable even on this table.
Yes, for my principal, the oversight functions and setting down, strengthening laws that will bring about policies that will be...
Constituency projects on education.
Oh, when you talk about constituency projects for education, when it comes to my principal, Senator Godswill Oboro-Pabio, the uncommon Senate President, it's evident when you go to our community, the constituency project when it comes to education. Just in my community, in the local government, we have structures that are being pulled out, in terms of accessible and conducive learning environments. I'm not talking about areas like Oborokara and the rest. And you can see that the call to action by my principal is also the pointer which has geared his colleagues in the 10th Senate to also put a focus in education as to their constituency and projects that lead into that direction. Godwin, I can guarantee you that you're going to be seeing a lot of that coming forward as the year ramps up. Just recently also, we've been able to come together with certain NGOs. I was going to share something here with you that has to do with one of the NGOs, if you permit, that I think is around financial literacy. I think one of the programs also made mention of that, because finances is also the bedrock, which has to be inclusive into the educational framework. A lot of problem is being embedded into poverty, and if we are very intentional to making sure that financial literacy as well as self-development are key areas also that we pay attention to, I feel like this is going to be a very good
praise God. We'll have to bring you back to this table, because we have to bring you back when we begin to inspect the implementations of some of the things that you've said. Because you're telling us right now, we're talking about time frame. Are you telling us on this table that your principal will do and is already doing? So when we begin to inspect some of these things, we'll bring you back to this table to tell us what has been the impact of constituency projects, even in terms of education and reducing the number of out-of-school children. Let charity begins at home.
Very well. I'm in the Dexys family, and I would always want to come back here and let us